Bad, Steven Soderbergh's new film, second film to come out this year, and this movie is written by David Koepp. Both of them are also the writers and directors of Presence, which is the previous film this year that Steven Soderbergh had come out with. And these are just two completely different films. In this movie is starring Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett as the main married couple that we focus on throughout this film. They are both spies working for the same agency, not the CIA, not the FBI, something much more secret and underground. And the cool thing is, literally every character in this film works for this secret agency. They're all spies. And there's a lot of collusion, there's a lot of conspiracy going on. Cat and mouse games being played throughout, and it really takes you on an experience, where you're guessing, you're trying to figure out what's really going on, because at the beginning of the film, Michael Fassbender's character, George, gets a list of names of possible people who could be working with outside parties, particularly Russia, who could be considered as traitors to this agency. And his wife, played by Cate Blanchett, Catherine, is one of the names listed on this piece of paper. So the whole film just ensues a cat and mouse chase of George trying to figure out, is his wife, involved in this? Is he going to choose his country and his agency, his job, over his wife? Or is he going to choose, his marriage? And Steven Soderbergh just does a really good job with keeping us engaged, because there's really no action in this movie at all. It's a spy, espionage film, much like something like James Bond would be. But that movie is packed with action. This movie is smart, sophisticated with its writing. David Koepp's script in this film is fantastic. The dialogue that we get between all these spies who are kind of working against each other, they're all trying to conspire against one another, manipulate each other to get to a specific goal, to cover up whatever they have to cover up. And the way they interact, they're all spies, right? So they all know how to lie to each other perfectly. They're so observant, so they're picking up on every little hint and detail. And when you have Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett as your two main leads in a movie like this, their presence, they just add to the sophistication of the script, of the way Steven Soderbergh directs this movie. And you really just can't go wrong with having these two absolute bona fide stars in a film like this. One of my favorite scenes is definitely more towards the beginning, involving dinner at George and Catherine's house, where they both invite, some of their coworkers over who are kind of a little suspicious, being investigated in some sort of way by George. And this scene is roughly 15 minutes long with just straight dialogue, but it's so intense, and some of it is hilarious, because like I said, they're all lying to each other, and they all are smart enough to know that they're lying to each other. But Michael Fassbender's character, George, he comes up with this cool game to where, they're going to make resolutions, much like on New Year's, but not about themselves, to the person on their right. And a lot of stuff starts to come out. A lot of things that they're holding back. They're being truthful. It's honest. It's also very brutal to hear a lot of this. And just the way that this scene is lit, particularly this scene, but the whole movie in general kind of has the same different lighting that just makes it feel like such a movie. A lot of movies aren't really lit that well these days. All the Netflix ones or Amazon, whatever it is, there's no shading. There's no, filters or shadows on their faces. It's just all bright and weird and dull. But in this dinner scene, there's 12 lights scattered in the middle of this dining room table. They're just, small little bulbs, but there's a lot of them. And they look kind of blurry, like they're almost like out of focus. And with these lights being out of focus, it creates a little rain around it, essentially, to where it really just looks blurry, kind of like a motion blur or a filter or whatever Steven Soderbergh wanted to use. But with this light being blurry and all the lights pretty much in every scene being blurry, it's emphasizing the characters more and just giving such a stylistic visual to every single scene in this film. And the stylistic choice of this lighting just really makes it feel like something he would have done, or just a lot of people would have done in the late 2000s. And a lot of those movies in the 2000s, late 2000s, they all felt like films. You don't really get that as much nowadays unless it's somebody like Steven Soderbergh or someone who's an auteur or who's just been in the game and who loves film like this. And another really cool and interesting scene in this film involves a room and a lie detector test where George is interviewing and asking all these questions, trying to pull answers out of all the agents, or other main characters in this film. All the people who are basically on his suspect list, and the questions that he's asking them are both shocking and hilarious. They're smart, and even a lot of the answers that are given back are both equally shocking and surprising and hilarious. But it's also very interesting in the way that these answers are given back. It's cutting between each agent, back and forth. And a lot of these questions that George is asking aren't meant for the character that's on screen. So you're always kind of being kept on your toes. And with the answers being given, we're also trying to figure out if they're lying, if they're telling the truth, much like George is having to figure out. So yeah, this was a very fun and entertaining scene and just further exemplifies how intelligent of a movie this is. And while looking this film up, I also found some cool trivia to where the director of photography and the editing credits are listed as Peter Andrew and Mary Ann something, I believe, for the editing part. And looking this movie up, looking at the trivia and all that, those are both pseudonyms for Steven Soderbergh. So in most of his films, he's the director of photography, he's editing it all, which means he's the one lighting it. He's the one making these stylistic visual choices for the specific film. He's doing all the cinematography himself, and I just thought that was a really cool little tidbit of information. We also have Pierce Brosnan in this film in a very small, tiny role. He's probably in only like 4, maybe 5 scenes, but he plays the head director, the guy at the very top who controls and looks over this agency that they all work for. He obviously played James Bond in the past, and he's getting very old, but I still think that he fits into a role like this perfectly, especially with him getting older, him being able to play the man in charge almost flawlessly. But yeah, he was definitely a great addition to this film, kind of adding a little bit of extra attention and kind of making you question certain things a little bit more, just adding to that conspiracy factor. And Pierce Brosnan is awesome in any film. I always enjoy watching him. And with the ending of this movie, I really enjoyed as well. It involves another dinner at George and Catherine's house to where they invite all the same people back over. But this time they're not having dinner. They're playing another game that George came up with, and Catherine this time too. This is where everything comes out. Everything is uncovered, in full. We figure out the reveal, who's been behind everything this whole time, because it is sort of like a whodunit in some sort of way, along with the spy and espionage film. But this scene is thrilling. The dialogue is once again just on point. It's sharp. And after everything is all said and done, all I'm going to say is, do not fuck with George and Catherine's marriage. So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this film. It's only an hour and a half. Short and sweet. It gets to the point. It doesn't dance around anything, waste time. It's thrilling from beginning to end, with certain scenes having more tension than others, but it keeps you engaged. It keeps you looking for little details, little hints, much like our main character George is doing throughout the whole film. This film is sophisticated, it's intelligent, as is the script. David Koepp and Steven Soderbergh are just an amazing duo who I hope keep making movies because they obviously love it. So yeah, definitely go and see this in theaters. Support Steven Soderbergh. There's not many filmmakers like him nowadays, and I definitely want to keep seeing movies from him. I'm going to give this movie a solid 8 out of 10. But as always, my name is Zach. I appreciate you guys watching. Like, subscribe, comment. Later.